Welcome. Mirroring and not mirroring on Zoom will always get you. So just Coach Josh and Coach Millie today. We had like an impromptu change to our schedule. We're recording on a Tuesday this week instead of our typical Thursday. And you will find the further we get into like our, careers as fitness professionals, we're very regimented in our schedules. And so I had to throw a kink in the chain this week because I'm leaving town for some meetings later on in the week. And then we all kind of got moved and rolled around here. So Coach Sam had to step out of this one kind of last minute. So it's okay actually, because I think Coach Sam and I were probably going to just kind of hang out and listen in this episode, because today's episode we're discussing our prenatal and postpartum issues, concerns, and kind of philosophies around women's health and exercise. And to be perfectly honest, I've actually never had a baby. I have 3 wonderful children that I was not in charge of birthing. So
shocking.
Yeah. So I don't know that I have a whole lot of inputs on this topic, but I know, Coach Millie, you do. You got 2 daughters. One, Helena, is
7 months.
7 months, and then Nora is 5.
Yep.
And so, and you actually kind of joined us when Nora was pretty little.
Yeah, I think she was like 14 months.
Yeah. So we've kind of seen your little ones grow up within the gym, but so we just wanted to take some time. We actually mentioned this a little bit in a previous episode, and we kind of mentioned that we would talk more about this. Let's just chat a little bit. One thing I will say is that I don't get too uncomfortable talking about this. I've got 6 sisters, 2 moms, and a wife, and so had plenty of conversations around the topics of women's health, whether I was knowledgeable on them or not. We really, this is an important topic that we broach with a lot of our females because we think it's just so important. It's something that's not discussed enough. There's not enough light shed on it. We've had actual, clinicians and professionals come in and talk to our women on a couple women's night. I know we got another thing planned for that coming up soon. But we believe that this is a topic that should be discussed, especially when we're talking about fitness. And to be honest, I think it's sometimes like a taboo topic. So I just want to kind of dive right in. Let's talk a little bit. What would you like to kind of start us off with today?
Well, I kind of want to start off with the whole journey from pregnancy through postpartum in the gym and kind of what that looks like.
Okay.
I kind of want to preface it by saying that every individual is an individual, and every pregnancy is different. Even if you've been pregnant before, your second pregnancy, your third, they could all be vastly different from a physical standpoint. So keeping all of those caveats in mind as we go forward with this discussion, these are kind of some generalities, but each person needs to decide what you are and are not comfortable with during your pregnancy and maintaining your physical fitness the best that you can.
I think that's a huge statement right there, because one, watching my wife have our 2 little ones they are 11 months and 20 days apart. So I watched 2 births rather quickly, but I will tell you that those 2 pregnancies were different for her. Those 2 births were different for her. And then on top of that, the clients that I've worked with over the years, I think I started training my first prenatal client. I was probably 20. So we're talking 17 years ago when I had my first gal work with me who was pregnant, and just her experience and my experience with her in that first endeavor. And then now, 15, 16 years later, very different. So I think that's a good statement to make. And so when we're thinking about this, one of the things that we always preface with when we talk about health and fitness and nutrition, it's a hard answer to give sometimes, but the answer almost always is, it depends. There's a lot of gray area with this. And so thanks for just starting out with that.
Yeah. So one of the first things I would ask somebody who is newly pregnant is, what was your physical fitness like before pregnancy? I think that's a great place to start. Obviously, if they're a member in our gym, we kind of have that answer. But maybe for you, you're newly pregnant and you haven't really been active, then your pregnancy workouts, if you will, is going to reflect that.
Sure.
We're going to want to keep you at a certain level that kind of reflects being a new athlete and newly pregnant. A couple of things that we consider, whether you're new to working out or not. Number one would be, what is the season that you're pregnant in? Are you working out in, is it summer and it's 100 degrees outside? That is definitely something that we need to consider as coaching staff with a pregnant person. We don't want your body to get too overheated. You are already hot when you are pregnant. Your body temperature is already elevated. And if it's 100 degrees outside and you're working out, that's probably one of my first considerations, is what season are we pregnant in? And what season are we going to be in that third trimester where we're just, we are huge. There's no other way to put it. Just being honest, if you're newly pregnant and you've never been pregnant before, I'm sorry.
You're going to be huge.
You're just going to be huge. There's that's
just setting the expectations.
just the way it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, your circulation, how your body responds to outdoor temperatures is different when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's extremely helpful to know. I know I had an instance, it was probably 5-6 years ago, that somebody contacted me and was like, hey, I just found out I'm pregnant and I'd like to start exercising so I can stay in shape. And I was like, okay, well, probably just starting to be pregnant and also just starting to exercise at the same time, probably not the best thing, but I think that is important to know. And again, it's that it depends model. What am I capable of doing during pregnancy? Well, a lot of that hinges on what you were doing prior to pregnancy and what your body was used to.
Right. And during pregnancy, our body is releasing hormones that are telling us to have our joints be relaxed. Even from the moment that you're pregnant, it's preparing you almost for that birth. And so your joints are more lax. So if your joints aren't used to a certain kind of stress through working out and weightlifting, or just even running or moving in general, then adding that extra stress already with the stress of additional hormones and pregnancy could set you up for being more prone to injuries. So it's just something we would keep in mind, which kind of brings me to the second point of monitoring intensity during pregnancy, which I think of heart rate and respiratory rate for this. When you're pregnant, so there's two schools of thought on intensity. Some physicians or medical professionals will say, hey, you need to keep your heart rate at 140 or less during pregnancy. Some medical professionals say it doesn't matter. So that gives so much to go on, obviously. That's why it is important to talk to your doctor and also do your own research and what you're comfortable with. Okay. So as fitness professionals, that is one of the things we're taking into consideration, is your heart rate. Another is your respiratory rate. I know that with Helena, even before I knew I was pregnant, I did a running workout and I was like, why can't I not breathe? Am I suddenly out of shape? I was like, I feel like I work out every day. And one of our members, he was like, oh, Millie, you're breathing really hard today, which I really appreciated.
You should really check on that.
And then also I was like, oh, I am. And actually I took a pregnancy test the next day because I'm like, that is weird. And I was pregnant.
Yeah.
So your body changes that fast and what you're physically capable of doing. So respiratory rate is another thing that we would monitor with intensity. So heart rate, respiratory rate, intensity. We may have you, even no matter what's written on the workout, be like, hey, every round you're taking a 60-second rest after each round.
Yeah.
We may say, hey, I know it says this many reps today in this time frame, but we're changing it up for you and you're just doing 2 rounds of this workout. It's not an AMRAP for you today. I just want you to get 2 rounds in this set time frame. So as coaches, we need to take your intensity down more times than not with pregnancy.
I think that's that is probably one of the hardest concepts for our clients to kind of grasp, because in our group setting, we have high intensity workouts, right? And so the whole idea is high intensity, but also we've talked about this in scaling and modifications, right? One of the ways we modify, one of the ways we scale is through intensity. But it's hard because we have a lot of females that, they have been exercising this entire time. They are comfortable coming into the gym still while pregnant to exercise with us because they trust us and they know that we're going to take good care of them. But then when we say, hey, we're going to modify this intensity a little bit, or hey, we're going to modify this load or the rounds, whatever else it may be, they kind of get a little bit out of shape sometimes. And I think one of the biggest communication pieces that I try to give to our to our clients. One, you talked about like the doctor thing is like, hey, it's my job to be compliant and work with your medical professionals. So one, like I always try to adhere to what the doctor has to say. If the doctor has some stipulations put on them that maybe I would, question or be interested in knowing a little bit more about, I might even ask, hey, would you mind if I called the doc and they put me on the HIPAA form or whatever else? And I've had conversations with some gynecologists and said, hey, this individual has been working with us at this level and for these things. How do you feel about their progress? We are coaching them every step of the way. And a lot of times they have some general guidelines, but again, it depends on the individual. And a lot of times they'll be willing to open up some of those guidelines, knowing that they're working with a professional on intensity, but they'll still give us some stipulations. But the other piece there is I try to tell our clients is, hey, you have one job over the next 9 months, and it is to grow a baby. And it's a very short time in the grand scheme of the life we're living here. So as much as it might be frustrating to you right now, you have one job and I have one job for you, and it's to help you grow that baby. And so if we got to bring intensity down a little bit, or if we got to bring loads down or rounds down a little bit, and it allows you to keep exercising, be okay with that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So another aspect on top of that is what stage of pregnancy are you in? So first trimester, some women sail through that. They're not sick. They feel relatively normal, which it makes our job even a little more difficult when we're like, hey, remember you're pregnant.
Sure.
You have other considerations.
Yeah.
Or if you're like me and you just are disgustingly sick the entire first 15 weeks of your pregnant into your second trimester.
Right.
Then there's other considerations. I was vomiting 5+ times a day. I had to go to the hospital several times for IV fluids. Obviously, and it was in the middle of summer. Coming in here and doing a workout would have been the dumbest thing I could have done for my physical health, short of like maybe taking a walk.
Yeah.
So there's all those considerations where we ask as coach staff, I think it's important to have an open dialogue with our members in general, but especially during this time, like tell us what you're feeling. Tell us, if you're like, hey, I'm just super nauseous, then we'll find something else for you to do that you can still move your body in a safe manner. But again, if you're really sick, throwing up, getting IV fluids, I don't really want to see you in here for a workout.
Yeah. We really approach a level of candor with our clients anyways. And there are sometimes there are uncomfortable conversations that we have to have, whether it doesn't have to just be a pregnancy, but we're open about conversations we have with our clients. And it's structured within our coaches protocol that they are expected to ask every single client, are there any injuries, issues, or concerns that you have currently today? And if so, we're going to work around those things. And that's tenfold for our ladies who are pregnant. And I think that's a good point that I find is like usually through that first trimester, it is a little bit difficult. And I even really try to pull the reins back even more in that first trimester with our ladies. And then, but I also encourage them like, hey, as we get out of this first trimester, usually things start to open up, things start to feel a little bit better, and you're going to be able to start to get back to some other things that you're doing. Now, you are also going to get to the third trimester, and I don't say for a second, you're going to get huge and we'll adjust then, you can say that all you want. I'm smarter, but I think that's a good point. So tell me a little bit. So, the season, the respiratory rate, the heart rate stuff, what are some other concerns maybe structurally and you did mention like lax joints, and I think that was a good point there. Other structural concerns that should be worried about as a female's going through those initial stages?
So the next two major ones would be pelvic floor. And this is especially as we do get larger and there's more pressure on our pelvic floor. So I think of like second half of the second trimester all the way through the end of that third trimester. Your pelvic floor is under a lot of pressure already naturally. Your guts have to have somewhere to go. You have this growing baby. Everything is pushing down on that pelvic floor. This is not a great time to max out your lifts, basically.
So I'm going to circle back just a little bit. Can you, in layman's terms, tell us what the pelvic floor is for those that might not understand what that structure is?
So your pelvic floor is essentially what holds everything up in your vaginal wall. On top of that is
I told you we were going to get deep here.
Pelvic floor, and that is what is holding everything in: guts, baby, uterus, everything. So if you can imagine, just you have this, almost this balloon down here, and all of your insides are sitting on top of it. That is what is holding them up and preventing vaginal prolapse or
Yeah.
things coming out that should not. So we want to keep it all in. We want to keep that pelvic floor
This is
healthy.
a great conversation. I hope
I love
everybody's
my really
enjoying.
professional terms. Sorry, guys.
I told you to explain it basic.
This is how I understand it. So, yeah, so it is that pelvic floor is what is holding up your insides.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's why we need to treat it well.
And it's a muscular structure,
It is,
right?
correct. It
So,
is a
so
muscle.
with that muscular structure, it is a stabilizing structure when we lift heavy loads.
Correct.
So even if I was moving a couch, okay, I would activate my pelvic floor to stabilize that internal abdominal area.
Correct. You should. You should.
Yeah, you should, right? Yes. And so, but that gets more difficult as a female as you're getting into those later trimesters,
Yeah.
and you already have so much pressure there.
Right.
So then you're creating more pressure on an area that's already under stress.
Right. So if you want to think about it almost in the terms of a deadlift, so when you do a Kegel later, ladies, you're lifting that pelvic floor. But if you are increasing that weight, it's almost like doing a max deadlift with your pelvic floor
Gotcha.
every time.
Yeah.
If you're, you think about all the pressure that you have with baby and insides, and then that pelvic floor holding it all up and in, plus you do have the same hormones that are telling everything to relax.
Yeah.
So your pelvic floor, it becomes harder to engage that pelvic floor as you should, because again, your body's telling everything to relax because you need to birth this child.
Right.
And those are the hormones that are in your body. So everything is kind of telling your body, no, don't.
Counterproductive.
Right. It's just
it's
a difficult time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so pelvic floor, what other structural concerns do you have there?
So the final one would be diastasis recti, or that is where you have your abdominal muscles that go along here on your abdomen. And as your stomach grows, especially in that third trimester, those muscles will separate. Okay. 100% of women by their third trimester will have an abdominal separation. Now, postpartum, which we'll get into, they should go back together. We'll talk about what happens when they don't. But your linea alba that goes along here is going to naturally thin. Your muscles are going to separate because they have to, because you need room for that. You need space.
Sure.
So it's a natural occurrence. All women have it. So in that third trimester, we want to prevent movements that cause your abdomen to dome. And by that, I mean, literally your abdomen will look like this.
Like a mountain.
It creates a mountain.
Yeah.
Because your muscles are over here and then everything is coming out the front, really is what it is. So it's because you have increased abdominal pressure, you have separating, and our job is to make sure you don't create even more thinning and even more separation as you're working out. So any movement that creates this dome, we're going to scale you down to the point that you either can control it, or there might be some movements that you can't do in that third trimester because you cannot control that pressure. So it's our job to make sure that you're not adding injury on top of a normal body process.
Yeah. So, and I, there was always things that we tried to avoid when I was, starting out and training prenatal clients, was around this, nothing belly down and nothing flat on their back. And it was all talked about the baby and the pressure that it could create on the cord, or, increasing the baby's, blood pressure and the heart rate and everything else. And I think those things are still true. But what I found even more so is that if I have somebody, completely flat out, it also puts a whole lot more, obviously not laying on their stomach, but even if they were in a push-up position and they were belly down, that plank style position puts a ton of stress on the core, and that anterior core then cannot maintain or stabilize. And so therefore it domes. And so what we look for most importantly is that doming, like you mentioned, either that might be a modification to an exercise, or just, kind of taking out an exercise completely in that area. And I've seen that a lot with our clients. And once we educate a client on it too, they're very in tune with paying attention to those things. But that is so important for us to continue to do that. And I think you'll talk a little bit more why that's important in the second part. But and then, so lastly, what would you say, what's the general rule when we're working on prenatal type training, prior to baby?
What feels good for you at the end of the day. what you're comfortable with, what feels good. Obviously, what is safe is probably before all that, but you know, you might not be sick that first trimester, but man, you work out and then you come home and you're sore and you're laid up for like 2 days because you just can't move because your body was like, hey, I'm also growing a human being. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So listening to your body is probably the biggest thing, and just be willing to adjust and get good at listening to what your body's telling you and don't ignore it.
And that's every day. Like it has to be daily that
Yeah.
you have those conversations
Yeah.
with yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's maybe, so that's a big chunk of what we want to talk about today, but maybe let's then talk kind of on the backside of this. So we have the baby. So we meet with our clients prior to once we know someone's pregnant, and it seems to be like we're some of the first to know. Sometimes we know before family knows. But then after baby, we require all of our ladies to sit down and meet with you prior to moving back. They do what we call a client success session. It's basically a goal review that we do with all of our clients, but it's especially important we do it right after a client, gets kind of cleared and before they move back into classes. What would be your postpartum considerations as somebody's moving back into exercise?
Sure. So number one, of course, we want to know method of delivery. Did you have to have a C-section? Were you pushing for hours on hours? Did you have any tears? So all of those are important to know. Obviously, we're going to bring you back slowly, but how slowly and what that progression.
Yeah, still.
Yeah. So I need to have an open discussion about how was your delivery. I always recommend seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't, and you thought about some of these things, and maybe you're having some of those issues, and maybe you had a baby 5 years ago and still having those issues, we do have pelvic floor specialists that we would recommend.
Mhm.
So hit us up and let us know, and we will definitely get you that information.
Yeah, absolutely. Does not matter how far postpartum you are. I also let my ladies know that leaking is never normal.
Yeah.
You should never leak urine. If you are, it's kind of the generation before ours, and I've been told that, oh, well, it's just what happens when you have babies.
After babies,
and
right.
that is true. It does happen after babies, but it can also be repaired and does not need to progress. And actually, one of the number one reason older women have to be put into nursing home is because of incontinence, and it is a very fixable issue. So again, doesn't matter how long postpartum you are, see a physical therapist so they can, get that taken care of for you and help you progress and heal. But again, if you're newly postpartum and you're leaking urine, it is not normal. It is not how you have to live. If you feel pressure in your pelvic floor area, that is also not normal, and you need to get that checked because you could have a prolapse.
Yeah.
Which again is also repairable with physical therapy, not quite as easy as the leaking, but it is something that you can learn how to move your body with, learn how to breathe, learn how to manage, and get physical therapy to help with that.
Can I ask a question on, so I just know that I've spoke with females that have struggled in the therapy side of things, because what I've seen is it's not covered by a lot of insurances. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is some do, some don't.
Yeah.
I know with my first pregnancy, when I went, they had to write my physical therapist had to write a special letter to my insurance to be like, hey, this is actually needed.
Yeah.
So yes, you may find that it is a little bit of a battle with your insurance company. It just depends on who you have your coverage through. So yes.
But I also believe that the more awareness we put around something like this, and the more women we get out there trying to get treated for these things, although it can be frustrating and expensive to have to pay out of pocket for these things, like my hope is that we can build more awareness around this issue, and that insurance companies would begin to actually recognize this as a major issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sorry, that was just totally separate.
No,
I
that's
wanted to ask.
important to know too. And I know that we all have our 6-week postpartum check with your doctor. Obviously, there are all levels of doctors out there. Some will pay more attention to you in this check, but both of mine were, oh, cool. Basically, you're still alive. Congratulations.
And your baby's still around. You've even kept your baby here.
Have you thought about what birth control you want to get on? And that is it. I had to request that they checked to see if my abdominal separation was healed. You have to request that they even check your pelvic floor to see if you have prolapse. They do not even check your heart. They don't check your blood pressure. Again, some do, some don't. This is my personal experience. They don't even lay hands on you. You went through a major physical experience,
Trauma. I mean,
birthing a baby.
yes.
And you're probably not sleeping well. You're probably, I mean, you know, you feel like you've been hit by a bus, and they're like, oh, cool. What birth control do you want to get on?
Yeah.
So take control of your own postpartum care and ask them to check to see if your abdominal muscles have healed,
Mhm.
or if you still have a gap that needs further physical therapy. And then you can get a letter from your doctor, which helps with the insurance companies.
Yeah.
Have them check for, you know, do you have a vaginal prolapse? You may or may not realize it right away.
Yeah.
So I know with my own postpartum care, you have to be your own advocate and make sure those things get checked, which is another reason I recommend a pelvic floor physical therapist, because they do check those things.
Yeah.
And maybe will give you more answers than your regular doctor will.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. So another consideration postpartum is if you are breastfeeding, those hormones that tell your joints to be lax and weird are still there.
Okay.
So breastfeeding definitely delays postpartum healing. It's harder to get your abdominal muscles to close if you do have diastasis recti, where they don't close. So you continue to have that dome until you either learn to control that pressure, get physical therapy to help heal that. But breastfeeding can make that journey take longer, and probably you won't reach full healing until 6 months after you stop breastfeeding.
All right. Well, that's good information.
So don't give up hope.
Yeah.
If you've chosen breastfeeding, that's awesome. Just complete that journey when you're done, and know that healing will come. It's just going to take a little longer.
Yeah, part of the process, and
Right.
kind of like we mentioned, like in the initial part, your job is to grow a baby.
Right.
All right. Well, after that, your job is to nourish a baby.
Right.
So,
Right. So it's just, it's our body's way of doing what it's supposed to do. It just delays
Yeah.
healing a little bit.
Okay. That's good.
A couple things to think about when you're returning to training. So you've had your postpartum exam. Hopefully your abdominal muscles have healed. If they haven't, either way, you should be going to see a pelvic floor physical therapist just to get the true, hey, you're good to go, you're all clear. Our job is, again, to hold you back just a little bit, because I know you're excited. You're like, I don't have a bowling ball attached to me anymore. I can like move again. It's just exciting to feel like a normal human being once more after pregnancy. But slow is fast. And we've talked about progressions before.
Mhm.
You've got to follow the correct progressions to heal, so you can keep going forward and not have to get to a certain point and be like, oh, dang, my abdomen's still doming, or, oh, I feel this weird pressure, or, oh, I'm still leaking. Follow the right progressions.
Yeah.
To getting back to that full bore working out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'll tell you, this has been extremely informative for me. And I mean, I know some of this stuff because I've listened to you. We've done a lot of research. Obviously, I've worked with clients before. But some of the stuff is even, just great to remember and remind me. And some of the stuff I didn't even realize. Here's what I would say is, I can speak for you in this. Like, this is something that you really are passionate around. And it's something that, as a female who's gone through some of these issues, that, you're really passionate about helping other females around there. So if you're someone out there that, maybe hasn't been able to kind of embark on that fitness journey, maybe after pregnancy, or if you're someone that's currently pregnant or about to be pregnant or whatnot, and you would like to talk more, I would really encourage you to reach out. You can reach out to Millie at Mrs. Patterson if you're someone who does stuff on Instagram. If you want to email her, it's info@crossfit-metroeast.com. She gets all of those emails. You can definitely, submit information on our website and, want to book a no sweat intro or anything else like that. But if you're someone that's in the prenatal or postpartum arena, we want you to talk specifically with Millie to have those conversations. And whether that's, working on some personal plans with someone, whether that's just kind of getting some feedback on what's going on with themselves. But this is something that's just really important to us, for all of our women, but just a personal passion project for you, I know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but hey, this has been great. Thanks, Coach, for sharing. I hope this information has been helpful to you. Also, like we said, we do have professionals in the area, and if you're in the St. Louis Metro East area and you want to get in touch with a women's health physical therapist, we would highly recommend some folks. And so if you want to just have more information on that, we'll actually include a couple of those links in our show notes, but also reach out to us if you have any other questions. Thanks so much, Coach. This has been a great conversation. We'll see you guys next week.